A fascist is one whose lust for money or power is combined with such an intensity of intolerance towards those of other races, parties, classes, religions, cultures, regions, or nations as to make him ruthless in his use of deceit or violence to attain his ends. Henry A. Wallace. Good day, everyone. Today on Philosophy, I will be offering my perspective on the allowance and condoning of violent acts against a fellow man or woman in the context of the reason thereof being a differing opinion. And, as you all more than likely have heard by now, there have been some recent events that have quite some relevance to today's subject, which have sparked much discussion on just that topic at hand. Those two events are the happening of Richard Spencer getting sucker punched twice by protesters, if you can even call them that, whilst in the middle of an interview in the middle of a city sidewalk, and Gavin McInnes' brief scuffle on his way to a ball, which he then followed up with an interview outside of the building the event was hosted in. Now, as for that interview, the one Gavin McInnes was a part of, he was quite happy to admit that the short-lived flail fest was brought on by the fact the anarchist he assaulted was, in a twist of irony, following local protest laws in that he was using a cardboard flagpole instead of one made of metal or some other illegal and more thematically anarchistic material. He then, on top of the open admission to assault, to cap his retelling of his lovely criminal acts off, also added that with this being the 4-year epoch of Trump and his decisions, we are entering what he believes to be the time where more physical and immediate solutions are quite acceptable and encouraged for sharply bothersome people. You know, think Shia LaBeouf's reaction to a man and his crowd of his "he will not divide" a shit show that got him arrested, for a recent example of this sort of behavior. And so, of course, these ideals, and ones akin to them, have presented us with the chasmic divide of reactions from the watching masses, ranging from various derivations of lauding and cheering those cretins that gave Richard a good couple wallops across the noggin and beckoning for the embrasure of Gavin and others' thinking, to a complete and total denouncement of the sentiment that inspired both Gavin and the two city streets fist-flingers. Now, as you might have seen on hubs like Twitter or YouTube, you might know of what is perhaps the most ironic stand that many of the self-dubbed champions of freedom of identity, the regressive authoritarian sort that like to cite themselves as the arbiters of morality and equality, appeared to be the main bulk of supporters behind this hostile idea. Of course, there are always outliers on the horseshoe, so I'll make the obligatory not all statement for clarity. And what I mean by this is a few of the more left half essentially have taken to a translation of Gavin's train of thought on the matter, as the same idea in different words has been presented by many, particularly in reaction to Spencer's clobbering. Effectively, it's the very same sentiment dressed in a different guise, that one should physically fight against the corrupt insert our personal, perceived greatest sinners cabal here. Particularly, it's those sort that have been taking a liking to throwing around the designator for a myriad of their personal colloquialisms of evil, the classic Nazi, or even more ironically, fascist. I've heard that latter variation come from people both in person and plastered across social media. And, in fact, I think that Bering's video in response to one Kevin Logan offers a fine, long gaze at the digital category that I, along with videos featuring some of the previously mentioned materials, will be linking in the description, and I highly recommend that you have a thorough watch of them if you've not seen them yet. That preface all said and set, we move to the opposite opinion of the followers of that bit of ideology. That is, it should not be socially and certainly not legally permissible to assault or otherwise forcibly censor those with opposing opinions which have not committed any illegal act, which would call for such a violent reciprocation. This is foremost the exact reason that condoning the acts and ideology backing the actors that clocked Richard and Gavin is nigh treasonous, and certainly akin to giving a blind man a loaded rifle. For from the point this rule of law is admitted, swung wide are the gates open to mob rule fascism, free to lace the foundation of a nation with cultural gunpowder. As so many of those crying out for their team to take the mantle have seemed to have forgotten from history near and far, the tyranny of the majority is one of the greatest exemplified social horrors you could birth into a society, especially today, in which you can damn near affect anyone, anywhere, from across any distance. In a time where location, history of activity, and the details of the precarities upon which one may hang their hat are child's play together, the malicious masses of like minds can network towards the ill use of these details. The internal culture wars of the past that rose from relatively minor but igniting acts, such as the assault of a given group's martyr or the killing of an influential figurehead, could today spark the eruption of an apocalyptic civil war. Exempligraria, on a small scale because of some residents' inborn trait of being white, we can look to something as local as Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where a civil smith was turned into a martyr by virtue of being killed by an officer, ignited a citywide manhunt amongst waves of black people against white people. To validate the admission of unprovoked violence against others on the grounds of only their opinions or any other inconsequential characteristic as a normality is offering a high foothold to that which so many of the self-righteous would be aghast at. The utter rending and dissolution of a society that values freedom of autonomy which does not eviscerate another's liberty. Aye, the gutting of lawful justice and the crucifixion of liberty. The twisted spawning of rabid sectarianism and the gruesome hanging, drawing, and quartering of one's freedom to speak at will. These, in addition to other symptoms of this sort of affliction on a country, unavoidably bring about the repression of social progress, pruning of the roots of genuine intellectualism, the grinding away of social ventures that aren't in line with the cultural narrative, and ushering in of the crushing tendrils of totalitarianism. These are the fruits of the guaranteed protection of those that seek to break their ideological opponents by physical force. And we who will not stand for such a cloud of dystopia to engulf the land will not stand for this, and neither shall the law. You who act on the violent, reactionary, misguided, and ignorant ideology these sort would push will be indicted, tried, and jailed, and are fined, if your misdeed is proven. As for you who advocate for this poisonous movement, you will be rolled under the treads of we who value all that the aforementioned would contribute to the destruction of's advocacy against. We, the latter, though we may disagree on the fine details of what a freely expressive society builds upon that cornerstone, will not sit idle. Thank you all for listening. Whether you found my content enjoyable or detestable, please give a thumbs up or down, share the video with others, subscribe, and contribute to the discussion via my social media, join the community at our Discord server through the invite link below, and engage with your fellow watcher via the comments below that. If you'd like to support the Xilver with a Z channel and allow me to take on idiocy and reach out to friends and fans on social media and keep the channel going, I would ask you to donate monthly via Patreon. You can do this by following the link to my Patreon and becoming my patron. Or if you wish to donate only once, a PayPal link tip jar is listed above that in the description. Till then, everyone, this has been Xilver with a Z.